3, 2, 1. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. I hope you're all doing very well on this beautiful night in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. I hope your ibadah and your worship and your contemplation have been going well. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode, whether you're tuning in live or whether you're watching after the fact. Inshallah, we hope for this to be a fantastic episode, which really, sets a standard in terms of how conversations in the community, even on issues which aren't always easy, can be had. For those of you who are joining in because they've seen something to do with imams and community and connection and disconnection, yes, we will be addressing the issue of the recent Eid announcement, but we'll get to that in due course. Stick around if you're interested or watching after the fact. We'll get to that at some point in today's episode. Before I get into the episode proper and introduce our esteemed guests, just a reminder to everyone, those who are tuning in for the first time, those who are repeat tuners, inners, that we are in the almost the peak of Ramadan. And if you have not yet made up your mind about where to give your zakah this year, to keep the National Zakat Foundation in mind, alhamdulillah, NZF continues to do amazing work in our community when it comes to helping brothers and sisters right here who are zakah eligible and channeling the blessing and potential of zakah into our own community. Whether it's on the zakah front or also on the sadaqah front, when it comes to sadaqah, if you have not yet set up something like a daily sadaqah option, NZF has that going on their website this year. You can automate, you can choose different options for how much to give on the even nights, odd nights, 27th night. So it's not too late. Get in and do that, inshallah. It's a great way of showing your regular commitment to Allah. And of course, we ask Allah to accept from everyone who is going ahead and showing their generosity to Him in that way. Now, without further ado, it's a very, very interesting and timely topic. Was not intended this way. We discussed this topic and chose it weeks ago, but it just so happens that it happens to be a very, very interesting topic here for today. So the topic is imams and the community. Are our imams out of touch with the community, more specifically? And it's a topic based on input and feedback we sometimes get about interesting conversations that can be had. And as you know, this show is all about those real conversations. And we've been blessed enough to have two really fantastic young brothers and imams, up and coming leaders of our community, join us for this discussion today. As we've been doing this year, I'm going to actually help them introduce themselves in the most relevant way possible. But before we do that, I want to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sheikhs, and welcome to Real Talk. Such a pleasure to have you on here. And thanks for making your time. I know you're leading Taraweeh and giving talks and reminders and obviously doing your own ibadah, with yourselves and your family. So I really, really appreciate you coming on. Qadarullah, could not have planned this better in some ways, but, I think it's actually beautiful because you are, as I see, the vanguard of the community in the future. And the attitudes and the way that I see yourselves and some of the other younger imams in the community dealing with some of the issues really shows the learning of an entire generation or two of experience in our community and us having seen what's happened in the past. So I'm very, very delighted that you could be with us. First, I want to find out a little bit about both of you from the perspective of being imams, like your journey to knowledge, where you've gone to study. For those in the community who might not be as familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourselves and that journey. And I'll start with you, Sheikh Jamaal.
How much time do I have?
Try and give me a 1-minute elevator pitch, inshallah.
Okay, so that's very okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. So I think my journey begins from being born to two blessed parents who alhamdulillah took me on the path of the deen from the very get-go. So I did memorize the Quran at the age of 14 and had a very religious upbringing that was also balanced, so it wasn't just memorize. So memorization I think was the sort of main endeavor in those sort of formative years of my childhood, and along with that was just development of Arabic. So alhamdulillah, my dad is of Egyptian background. My mum's Australian, but with my dad, just having a dad that was very concerned about ensuring the language isn't lost while growing up in this Western society. So that pretty much formed the backbone of what came later on. So. Of course, completed my high school education, and then went on to do a psychology degree, which I finished with honors, alhamdulillah. And then a few years later, I was accepted into Medina University, where I completed a Bachelor of Islamic Law, Bachelor of Sharia. It's a 4-year program, and alhamdulillah, I was able to skip the Arabic. Typically Western students would do the 2 years of Arabic as a bridging course to commence their actual degree. But alhamdulillah, I was able to skip that. So it was all packed into a nice 4 years. And yeah, since then, of course, we had the lockdowns. But then it's probably, I think I'll comment on sort of. The development of the journey, because at the time, like my decision to study overseas, that was just, for my own personal enrichment and fulfillment. It's like, you've got these sort of primary tools, like you've got the memorization of the Quran and also the Arabic, so. And then, just growing up in the society, and from a mixed background, the only thing I can fall back on in terms of identity was the deen, and so for me, just having, a very sophisticated, in-depth understanding of the deen, at least on some level, of some reasonable level, that was important to me, and that's pretty much the incentive. There was no sort of I wasn't envisioning myself as being employed as a full-time imam at the time. I just thought, okay, this will be my sort of side endeavor, and I would have to be a teacher or
sure.
just work in some sort of secular career, because ultimately the economy here is secular, and I think I'll talk a bit more about what that means for imams. Inshallah.
And so now you find yourself as the resident imam at the El-Kiki Mosque.
one of the imams there. So. Of course, the LMA and is a sort of caretaker of El-Kiki Mosque, and within the LMA, I'm the religious affairs coordinator. So I do actually, I'm typically the first point of contact with any religious inquiries made to the LMA. So people want to, speak to a sheikh about, some personal or family issue, or any other issue, wanting to convert. I typically would be the first point of contact there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Sheikh Ibrahim, what about yourself? Tell us about the Turkey journey.
Well, the Turkey journey was the latter part of my journey. So alhamdulillah, I've been part of the Umayyad Center since I was a very young child, right? I can't remember, man. I was very, very young. So I grew up in the Umayyad Center back when it was in Lakemba, and I became part of the Dawah team that was running Dawah initiatives there. So from, I think, the age of 13, I had some specific responsibilities at the Umayyad Center, when I finished high school, I went into university here. I was on my way to studying paramedicine, so becoming a paramedic. I received a scholarship that was offered to me by the Umayyad Center to go overseas and study. I went to Malaysia first. I spent a couple of years there, then I went to Dubai for a little while, and then after that I went to Turkey and I finished my studies there. Simultaneously, whilst I was overseas, I was also studying some secular degrees. So I did my bachelor's in communication and master's in human rights. Now I'm back in Australia. I came back in 2019, so it's been a couple of years. Obviously, I'm back at the Umayyad Center. I am one of the imams there. I'm also appointed as Director of Public Relations for Australian National Imams Council, and now also recently an executive member of the Australian National Imams Council.
Wonderful, fantastic. So talk to us a bit, both of you, and I guess we'll start with you, Sheikh Jamaal. What is life like for a imam, like in your sort of role? What does it look like? Leading prayers, the questions that come in. What practically, what does a day look like?
Okay, so I mean, there's things I do after hours, and there's things that I do within the hours of my work. So my job is mostly an office job that's 9 to 5. Outside of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, we do have reduced hours during Ramadan with the perks of working in a sort of Muslim community center or organization, I should say. Typically, like what I mentioned about receiving inquiries, that's more within the office hours. But outside of that, I also do khutbas. I mean, sometimes I leave work to give khutbas elsewhere. I also lead prayers. So I do lead prayers at Masjid Sunnah in Lakemba. The Fajr, Maghrib, and Isha. I do that consistently. I'm pretty much the main imam leading prayers over there outside of Ramadan.
Right.
Of course, in Ramadan they have their overseas qurra taking over, so I'm just it's pretty much a break for me. There's less sort of commitments after hours, alhamdulillah, which is it's quite
So it's
relieving.
Masjid al-Sunnah, not the Kimber Mosque.
Yeah, I mean, it's just because like a mosque already has its imams,
Got it.
and there's a scarcity, and I think a big topic I'll talk about is the scarcity of imams,
Yes.
who can fulfill various roles, especially like leading presence and so on and so forth. But there's things that I do after hours, but like also during work hours, okay, the question was, what does life look like? Yes, so just receiving inquiries, typically like one big one would be complaints, that are marriage related, so like, when people have an issue within their marriage, like the first point of recourse is typically a sheikh, so, and LMA being, sort of like one of the very first, organizations within the community, like it's a turning point, or it's a point of reference for many people, like Al Mosque. So yeah, like a lot of people would turn there for help. I'll typically be the first person to receive that and just see what's happening and then reach out to the other party, like just try to mediate in a way. Yeah.
What other sort of inquiries do you get, like inheritance and?
I do. It's quite varied. So it could be. I mean, there's also marriages. Like doing Catholic Kitab and registering Australian marriages. I am a celebrant. There's also conversions. So when people want to convert, like they look up mosques in Sydney, and so Al Mosque will probably come up, and they'll come to the LMA to convert. Alhamdulillah, and preparing conversion certificates. And just giving them just a 101 on what Islam involves. So alhamdulillah, I do that. That's the more sort of hope and inspiring kind of side of it. Alhamdulillah. Beyond that,
what about teaching? I notice you're giving lessons. And,
sort of in a less, in a more secondary capacity. Yeah. But another thing, it's just miscellaneous Islamic questions. Especially during Ramadan, it does, using a puff or break my fast. Menstruation issues. All those that can come up all the time.
and is this over the phone or by email
or? Both. Yeah. It could be both. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Sheikh Ibrahim, what about yourself? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it's a bit hectic, to be honest. Alhamdulillah, we have our philosophy at the Ummah Center is that we do what we need to do for the da'wah. There's one statement that always rings in my mind that the Mufti, Dr. Ibrahim Abu Muhammad, once said to me. And he says, إذا امتهنت الدعوة امتهنتها. So what he's saying is that if you take the da'wah as a job, then you are degrading da'wah. It's far greater than a job, right? It's more than your, certain hours that you need to do. It's more than just a salary. It's about specifically identifying what the community needs and fulfilling those needs. And so that's the philosophy that we have at the Ummah Center. So we're around the clock, non-stop. We don't have specific hours, and we do what we need to do. And I'm saying we because we're 5 mashayikh, and we have a number of departments. Each of us heads a department. I head the Islamic Media department. With that, you also, I mean, just like Sheikh Jamaal, we have, the various phone calls that come through, right? That come through to me personally, and sometimes I dodge them, and sometimes I'm able to palm them off because I'm just too bogged down to deal with that right now. And so it consists of meetings non-stop. You would know this. You're one of those people, right?
Absolutely.
It consists of even actually going out and filming, because Islamic Media itself is it's a growing YouTube channel, and so we're putting a lot of effort in that. It consists of leading the prayers. It consists of delivering lessons for our Sydney Islamic College.
Yep. So you're one of the teachers there.
I'm one of the teachers at Sydney Islamic College. It consists of leading prayers. It consists of giving the khutbah, attending to the needs of whoever it may be. Sometimes you get a phone call. Look, there's no one who's available to, be there for the family when they need to bury that person, right? And I know, mashallah, there's a lot of organizations that are doing a very good job in this, but sometimes there's those little gaps, and I'll get that phone call, and I've had to attend, right? Like it's rare for me, but what I'm saying is it's just a whole range. It's a whole mixed bag, and there's no one set, job description, if you like to call it, right? And so Yeah, that's pretty much what we do.
Leads to a question I had for both of you. What sort of challenges does it present being an imam with that sort of lifestyle? Like,
Challenges? Oh, there's heaps of challenges. The first one is family.
yeah,
It's hard, it's difficult. Anyone who romanticizes, wallahi, being in the life of a sheikh or anything like that, no, wallahi, it's difficult, it's hard. It requires, sacrifice. Your family is going to, well, they're not going to see you, right? My wife, mashallah, hats off to her. She's very patient, and may Allah grant her goodness in this or in the next. But without her supporting me and also raising the children, well, I can't do the da'wah that I'm doing, right? And it's no easy job. So yeah, that's the biggest, for me personally. I think that's the biggest challenge. It's family, and I don't clock off at 5 o'clock and go home and see my kids.
Yeah,
I don't do that. It's just around the clock. And even when I am home, my mind's here and my mind's there. I'm emailing this person, messaging that person, I'm taking a phone call from here. It's non-stop, right? Yeah. Even Saturdays, Sundays, right? Sometimes it really gets to you, so you just switch off. And I have to do that at times. I have to, because at the end of the day, like, my family has a right over me.
your sanity has a right over you.
Absolutely, that too. Right? But for me, I look at my family and I say, look, they've got priority now. Okay, now it's time to switch off. And I do. I switch off. Anyone who calls me, anyone who messages me, not interested. I'll speak to you later.
Yeah.
I need to give specific time now for my family. And if I don't, then I'm basically not practicing what I preach in regards to people being there for their family.
So, a very interesting thing we'll pick up in a little bit. Sheikh Jamaal, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I think one big thing I've learned in this capacity is just putting boundaries in place. So like I guess given the nature of my work, not giving my private number out. So just drawing a line between if I am to be contacted, it's got to be through the LMA main line. Without sort of going through my mobile number. That's sort of one boundary. But then also, I mean, like for me, like my personal experience is just the 9 to 5 is in and of itself like quite hectic. Like it's often back to back. Very intense sort of cases. Sometimes like actual domestic violence. Involved, and sometimes I'm on the receiving end of the verbal abuse. So it can be
because you've taken one side or something like
that. How do you do that?
Yeah. Oh, I mean that's another topic.
Verbal abuse.
Yeah. I mean, I try to pacify. I try to. But while being assertive, obviously. But like again, like maintaining like and trying to reassure of neutrality, like to an extent, because sometimes it's just very blatantly obvious, where a person is in the wrong, and they're just not willing to admit it. But that's a topic for another day. But I think another one is, I mean, where I can't really set a boundary is when there's funerals involved, because this is like short notice and any time of that it could be on a weekend, so sometimes it's like this funerals, a person's passed away, they need a sheikh, and I get the call and it's like if I'm in there, well, someone's got to fill that gap, otherwise there's a service that the LMA has to deliver, and like if there isn't a sheikh, it's like we paid this much for this funeral service, and you're not
sure,
it's like just pick a sheikh off the shelf, and
and is that leading the janazah prayer or more than that?
Sometimes the janazah is held at the cemetery, so it could be that way, or it could be at the mosque, it just depends on the schedule and the logistics of it. I don't know.
And I mean, this sort of resonates with me because of the career that I have. So I can sort of, this not really being able to switch off thing is a problem for people in many different professions. But I think with the weight of your sort of, now is a bit of not intermediary between people and Allah. We're not Christians in that sense, but you get what I mean. You've got a role, a divine role almost, a sense of responsibility. You're sort of mediating and explaining the deen to people, and often their port of recourse, like in your case. How does that play on your mind? Like from a mental health perspective, what are the sort of pressures that sometimes act on imams, which a lot of people may not sort of appreciate, because people expect sheikhs and imams to be like these superstars, everything's down pat, you're so well known, what struggle could you have in life, that sort of stuff. I want to pick up a little bit on what Sheikh.
I mean, I think just to put it simply, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you need to have you need to set time for your family, for your mental health, for your self-care. So I think that's really important. If it's relevant to counselling, then certainly like here. But I think along with that there comes the sort of religious guilt. The sense of obligation. there's a need within the community. It could be like an urgent, pressing one where it can be delayed, and that versus my own, sort of self-care, So I'm often, faced with that sort of dilemma. But yeah, like ultimately, yeah, you just want to give yourself it's right, and also eventually one's family, and as the Prophet ﷺ said, وَإِنَّ لِنَفْسِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا وَإِنَّ لِأَهْلِكَ عَلَيْكَ حَقًّا فَأَعْطِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقًّا. You have to give each sphere of your life its due right, basically. So yeah, I think balance is really important, and imbalance, it can certainly lead to burnout, So and that's it's just going to incapacitate you. It's just it's self sabotaging. That's really the essence of it. So just making sure that you fill your cup before returning onto that scene. I think that's really essential, and that's what I've had to learn.
Sheikh, what about you? So you touched a bit about sort of having to switch off at some time, but how do you sort of?
I don't give in to expectations. I don't care what anyone thinks of what they expect from an imam. I'm the one who's on the ground, not them. And I can see what's happening and what needs to be done. Now, if someone wants to put an expectation on me that's unreasonable, I'm not going to give into it. I really don't care. I'll simply just ignore it, right? So when people come out and they tell me, oh, wallah, you're not around or whatever it is, Habibi, come do my role and tell me when you're around, right? Look, at the end of the day, I still have to take care of my family, myself. And I echo the same sentiment, right? I have to take care of myself for me to actually deliver what I need to deliver. I, by myself, am not going to change the world. I can help in changing the world, right? So I'm just one piece in the puzzle. And this whole expectation, oh, well, the imams are going to solve all of the problems in the community. I mean, that's just a cop-out.
We're just scapegoated, really. That's what it is. We're the source of revival, and like parents, like within the homes, it's like just outsource the imam, and then like when the kids go astray, oh, like where are the imams? Like what did they do for our community? Where are they? So it's
I want to. There's a specific question we got in the lead up to it, right? And it sort of you sort of touched upon it, but I really want to sort of hear it spelled out and explicated, because this is a thing that people say a lot, right? And there's certain imams and mashayikh that I have in mind in our own circle where people will say he's impossible to get in touch with, right? You just you can ring him all day, he's not going to pick up, right? And for a while, I used to, when I was a bit more sort of ignorant of these matters, I used to be like, yeah, they should do that. Not that I ever said it or whatever, but there was like, maybe they should. The closer I've gotten to, sheikhs like yourself, Sheikh Shadi, and many others, and I guess just living a busy lifestyle where you're serving multiple, let's say, stakeholders in the community. But in my case, it's working with a company that has many clients and so forth, and everyone can be on your back at the same time, sometimes by pure coincidence. I begin to see now how tough that can be, right? So tell us how you would sort of respond to people who like the sheikhs are out of touch, they're not accessible, they don't pick up their phone calls, they don't respond to WhatsApp messages. Because what that person isn't seeing is perhaps you're receiving that from 100 different people on the same day. So Sheikh, tell us how it's like practically.
Well, exactly. I mean, you spelled it out exactly how it's like, right? And let me tell you how I deal with it, right? When someone actually comes out and says something like this, I say to them, when you want to go and speak to a lawyer, you call up, you make a phone call, you're not going to see that person until another couple of days, at least a week or maybe two, right? Anything that you do in life, you have to wait before you receive that appointment. Why is there some sort of expectation that I want to call the sheikh and he needs to deal with my issue right now?
Yes, thanks for that.
Why are you the center of the world?
Yeah.
Who said your problem is the one that, the whole Muslim ummah banks on, that we need to solve on right? Habibi, there's priorities. And forgive me, your wife and you fighting with one another and wanting to get a divorce is not the be all and end all of the ummah, right? We can deal with your issue. We're going to get to it, right? But I mean, come on, be realistic, right? I mean, if for anyone to get a divorce in this country, if they've got children, it's like a 2-year process. But with the imams, no, it has to be done now. Why? Why is there such an unfair expectation on the imams? And then add to that, the complexities of the structures that we've got as a Muslim community, where we're still playing catch up, right? We don't have enough homegrown imams to offer the services that you want in English.
Absolutely.
We're still playing catch up. I mean, be realistic at the same time, right? So that's why I don't give in to these expectations.
That's fascinating. I want to ask a question off that. where do we think these expectations come from for our imams and sheikhs versus, as you mentioned, every other category of people in the world? Doctors, dentists, you all know you got to line up, right? Lawyers, as you said, any professional service, marketing firms, whatever it is, right? But why with the mashayikh, and when it comes to deen, is everything like must happen for me right now? Where do you think that's coming from?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe لا يجوز تأخير البيان عن وقت الحاجة. There's a principle that like if there's an urgent matter that it needs to be addressed immediately. Maybe it's just a misinterpretation. I don't think people are that informed or well read, but it's more they have a religious obligation, and are they fulfilling it? Like here's an immediate crisis. Like come and deal with the crisis. And without realizing, well, there's like a triage. It's a triage situation.
What about like? This is what I personally have a hypothesis, which is that people are just, as you sort of mentioned, they're just outsourcing their problems. They're not well read in the deen. They don't bother to learn the deen, and then when crisis hits, because they don't have the tools.
So there's like asking religious questions. I think I'll distinguish between that which are not necessarily sort of urgent, but important but not necessarily urgent. But then there's sort of urgent matters where I don't know, like the husband's just about to pronounce talaq, something like that, or it's after the fact. Like today I had a brother come and I pronounced it 3 times in extreme anger. What can I do? Is it savable? Is it salvageable? So so 2 different sort of scenarios, I guess.
And then you're having to pay the price reputationally for our sheikhs aren't there to deal with.
No. So I always say, I throw the ball back into their court. Sorry, Habibi, this is basic fiqh. Go learn. You shouldn't be reaching out to me so you can learn your basic fiqh, right? Go learn. Don't throw the ball back in my court. No, it's in your court and keep it there, right? If it's a specific matter that requires a bit more knowledge, okay, you know what, we can sit down and have it. But why do we always dumb down everything when it comes to the religion, as though we can't use our intellect to serve the deen? But for everything else in the world, when it comes to money, we know how to use our intellect. When it comes to relationships, we know how to use our intellect. When it comes to getting a job, we know how to use our intellect. But when it comes to the deen, I don't know anything. Let me go speak to the sheikh. Why? Read, learn.
So to the connected issue then of the demand supply issue. You touched on it just before. Tell us about what the reality is on the ground. And I'll come to you, Sheikh, as well, because I know you and obviously Sheikh Shadi have a strong view on this and are doing something about it. But what's your perspective? Like, do we need more? Is there a gap? How would you address that?
So let's start from the issue of opportunities to study overseas. Because that's pretty much in order to get a self-contained formal education within Sharia. Then it pretty much up until now it has to be overseas. There are some online opportunities, but it's just generally being overseas. Okay, so like let's take Medina, that's my experience, for example. People would be waiting for some years and then potentially getting accepted, and then they might have already been married by then, and then it's like the whole immigration issue of can I bring my wife? There's so much red tape around that, so. There's so many sort of landmines on the journey to actually graduating as a student of knowledge with a formal qualification on their belt. Not to mention the sort of the language gap, or like if you're not coming from an Arabic background, you might learn some amount of Arabic, but then you're going to have to sort of take this huge jump to take on this course entirely delivered in Arabic. You know what I mean? It's like the assignments, everything is only in Arabic. So the language barrier, and just the alienation, I guess, living overseas. Other than the fact that it's next to the Prophet's mosque, at least with the Medina experience. So if you get to the end of it, okay, and you graduate, inshallah, then there's okay. You graduated, mashallah, we've got another Medina graduate. All right, he comes back to Australia, like what next, and that was a huge question on my mind at the time. It's like, okay, I guess before actually graduating, what next for me, because ultimately, I was being faced with a secular economy, and what place does a sheikh have, I guess, to serve, in a primary capacity, in a sort of career capacity, as a sheikh, in this sort of economy, so at the time, I was thinking of a few different options. I was thinking of speech pathology. I was thinking of being a teacher, and then I don't know, doing some evening classes somehow. I don't know how that in retrospect, it just doesn't seem like a feasible option. So those were the sort of options at the time. So like for me, as I said, and that's part of why I just thought of my seeking of knowledge as just a personal endeavor for my own personal fulfillment and enrichment, just so that I'm intellectually enriched. I connect with the Deen and engage with it on a very intellectual and of course spiritual level, inshallah. So coming back to the question of the supply. Okay, so if you do manage to graduate, then you're sort of faced with that dilemma. And I know graduates who've actually gone into there isn't much opportunity in terms of a career as an imam. So they end up like opening restaurants. That's how they support themselves. Because the reality is you need to support yourself before you can support others. You need to attend your own. If your needs are not fulfilled, how are you going to attend to the needs of others? So that's just the reality of life. That a lot of graduates are having to face.
And so the lack of community infrastructure.
That's what I'm going to get to. So like it's just the lack of like in Muslim majority countries, you would have a Ministry of Awqaf, a Ministry of Islamic Affairs, who like have a budget to hire imams, hire khatibs, hire religious advisors. So the infrastructure is there. Whereas of course, I think like in our community's defense, we're still a relatively young community, but the problem is the lack of supply as a result. So like this whole where are all these Medina graduates? What are they doing with like where are they for? Well,
that's often the thing that gets said. So, where they disappear.
Alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful. In light of that, given that context, I'm very grateful. Alhamdulillah, that I am able to give back. Just given that alhamdulillah things have worked out in that way. Otherwise, I probably would have been in a secular career. At the moment.
And that's something that.
So that's the supply.
Yeah.
And so that creates the scarcity. Of homegrown imams and like of course may Allah reward all the sort of migrant imams. Our migrant mashayikh from overseas, but ultimately there is that language barrier, the cultural barrier between the generation that's born here and the generation that migrated. So it's alhamdulillah, there's a few of us, but there's a scarcity, and with the scarcity comes the pressure, and and then why aren't the imams,
That's right, and then there's the cycle,
and that's the thing, so the supply, and then the demand is so immense, there should be so many imams per capita ideally, but but then I'm having to respond to calls and inquiries from Canberra, because and I think another thing I'd add to that is it's one thing to be an imam, like someone that can read the Quran, with a good voice. So I think that sort of profile is quite present and widespread. But the issue is being qualified in fiqh to at least not necessarily give a fatwa, but at least apply a fatwa accurately to a given scenario, which is naql al-fatwa, to it's not just Islamic Q&A, it says this, but rather you consider the reality, the conditions, the exceptions, does it align with this particular verdict, is it suitable to our particular Australian context, so there's all these considerations, understanding the qawaid, the dawabit, there's so much that goes into giving a yes or no answer sometimes, so that is an even greater a further layer of scarcity. We don't unfortunately have that.
So it's like these filters by the time which you're left with so few, and then the community responds in this sort of way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sheikh Ibrahim, is there a solution to this problem? Like, how do you think we get around this? If say, for instance, imams and mashayikh don't have a viable career path, if they know that they could be opening restaurants and earning more money and not be harangued by the community, what is the end goal? And maybe speak to us from the UMA perspective, is how's the UMA built an infrastructure which has allowed 5 resident imams, let's say, to service the needs of the community, be looked after, and know that they've got a safe career there, if you want to call it that they can now truly dedicate themselves to the community, even with its externalities and problems with people saying the sorts of things we discussed. How do we sort of scale this, if you will?
Well, no, it's literally the model that the Ummah Center has done, and it's worked. Sheikh Shadim, Allah bless him and reward him, he invested about 10 or 15 years ago in 5 of the mashayikh. We went overseas, we studied, all in different times, and we started to come back. And now we're servicing the Muslim community. We're 5 in the Ummah right now, and we're all stretched thin. There's still a couple of others who are still studying, being sponsored by the Ummah at the moment. And they'll be coming back. Inshallah, they're going to service the Muslim community, and we're still looking for more. And it can't be done just by the Ummah. Every organization in this country needs to adopt this model. It's not like we have a choice. No, we have to adopt this model. Because right now there's nothing in this country where one is able to study the deen to a level in the Arabic language that's traditional, to a level that's accepted for one to be set to receive the qualification as an imam. Now, what's the alternative? Yeah, you gotta go overseas. Is it hard? Absolutely. Is it difficult? 100%. Is it financially burdensome? Yeah, it is. But
So it's like a 4-year setback on your financial progression, pretty much. You know? Yeah.
It's difficult. It's difficult, right? And so every organization needs to adopt this model until we have a university in Australia that would offer something that equivalent to an overseas degree that's accepted by mainstream imams. Then we might have something local. But in the meantime, we don't.
What are your thoughts on purely remote-based systems of learning?
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Look, you can learn, but learning online is a whole world different than when you are learning in person. When you're learning in person, you're learning from the character of the Sheikh more than you are learning the action. Absolutely, 100%. And so obviously online you don't get that. When you're in person, you've got the challenges that come with being a talib ilm. And that is the financial challenge, which is massive, but it teaches you a good lesson. It breaks you. It tames the ego. I always say this: the best time of my life was when I was studying, because it was just me and Allah. Now I'm back here, but it's me, and and there's a whole range of other things that might enter my heart and changes the intention. But back then, it's just me and Allah. So I know exactly what it's like, and I'm working to keep that specific relationship in everything that I do, because now I've got a foundation and it's solid. And you don't get that when it's online. In person is the only way forward.
Do you think the community is headed the way that you're mentioning, where centers or masajid are beginning to realize the importance of imams who are born here, grown here, go and study, come back with the knowledge, and then implement? Like, do you see signs of that?
I think, look, I've had conversations with a number of other organizations as well, prominent ones, and I think they know there's a need for it, yet there is, I don't know why, still some form of reluctance to send someone overseas, right? Look, I get it. It's not for everyone, and it's also hard to identify the right individual, right? And so, and look, it's happened with us at the Ummah, right? Where someone goes, but they don't complete these studies. Fine, move on. Pick up your wounds, and just move on.
It's a big investment to make.
Absolutely. And even if this person doesn't come back and work directly for the organization, alhamdulillah, they're coming back for the community. Right? So it's still an investment, right? It's still an investment, not just for the organization, but for my children and my children's children. Right? And so the benefits compound, even if it's not direct to the one who's investing. It's a no-brainer. And more organizations need to actually go ahead and follow this route.
Do you think it's possible in the medium to long term that we would have our own institutions here that are able to produce that level?
We're in the process. So the Ummah Center, part of our vision is that we're going to have a Islamic University, inshallah. So we've currently got the first nationally recognized diploma for Islamic studies. It's all in the English language though, and this is, for the layman. Right. But off the back of that, inshallah, we're gonna establish a university, and this university is going to be the medium is going to be in the Arabic language. We're also going to include subjects that are relevant to imams that would not have otherwise studied these subjects while studying overseas, that are necessary for our context. So the Australian context, right? So the English language, for example, writing essays, all of these things that are not taught overseas in the English language, which are necessary. Because I remember when I first came back, right? I was sitting there trying to think to myself, how do I translate this fiqh principle or this fiqh matter into English? And I'm sitting there trying to, because I learned it all in Arabic, right? And I'm thinking, I actually now have to translate it into the English language. I don't know how to say it in English. Right?
You think in Arabic, it's
that's also another necessary element to strengthen the next generation of imams that come through.
Yeah, and I might just share here as well, that alhamdulillah, like inshallah, launching next month, is basically Al-Azhar Sydney. So this is actually an initiative that's sponsored by the LMA, and it's going to be held at on site at the LMA, and it's basically the curriculum for the senior high school students mainly, and also any adults that want to sort of get a basic foundation in the Islamic sciences. So this is sort of targeting year 10 onwards. From year 10 to year 12. That it's basically the Azhar curriculum, taught in at high school level in Egypt, but also in Lebanon, and inshallah that's hopefully coming to Sydney and launching next month. That's hopefully going to constitute like a stepping stone to enable tertiary studies after that. And hopefully the tertiary studies do come eventually and are enrolled in the near future, inshallah.
In Australia, you mean?
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah.
A difficult question, and not to be devil's advocate here, but
Sure.
there's been many false starts in the community, right? Of madrasas, full-time, 6-year courses, masajid, you probably know what I'm talking about, started with great hoo-ha and fanfare. Multiple institutes. There was an Arabic institute about 10 years ago, so 11, 12 years ago. Literally was focused on creating tulab who would then, either study here or go overseas. How do we get out of the cycle of, there's a lot of enthusiasm around some of these courses or these full-time offerings, which just peter out with time because kids drop out, young students drop out, they get married, they move on, they're being held at a masjid, and it just doesn't have the ecosystem and infrastructure. I mean, you go there, fine, you study that, but then you realize I'm sitting on the ground, I'm learning, but just the system isn't there, the exams, people don't turn up, and eventually people lose steam, and then you've got 5 brothers left, becomes 3, one gets married.
That happens at Medina Uni, so if they don't have the stamina and they're just not built for it. That's the bottom line. So
is it just that we're starting with so few people that by the time they enter that funnel and get down, you're just left with nothing at the end?
I guess,
What about, for example, and this comes to mind, I'm not sort of necessarily picking on it, there's a Darul Uloom in Melbourne, for example, and it gets spoken about. So it's the Indian, Pakistani sort of side of community. But you don't see, I think with one exception, people emerge from there and go on and become imams in the community. Why do you think that is? Is that just because people study there, they go, yep, got my Islamic qualification, off I go to my IT degree, and then after that, hey presto, I'm in a $100,000 job, and that's my career now?
No, I think honestly, the problem with Darul Uloom, right? Even though I think it's excellent, right, in terms of sending children there so they can actually learn, the curriculum's really great, right? But a lot of times it's like parents think to themselves, okay, I'm not doing so well in my deen. Let me send my child. This person will save me and take me to paradise, right? And then they do their studies. Child doesn't want to be there. But hey, mum and dad sent me, so I'm going to go, right? Okay, I finished my studies. Yep, now you're happy? Okay, now it's time for me to do what I want to do. And they go to university and they don't continue. Right? If it doesn't come from a drive within you, well, why would you expect it to continue?
The tarbiyah has to be modeled from the parent. If it's not... If it's just an academic pursuit on the side, then it just doesn't produce a lot of variable. Just someone with a basic foundation, with the love for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just becomes this. What can I say? It's an escape from what a parent should be doing with their child, and it is tough, because especially I don't know in the modern social and economic, with the social and economic pressures of today, parents are just fatigued and I don't know, thinned out, with work, with paying off bills and rent and that sort of thing. So it's by the time they have time for their children, it's they just don't have the. I think just giving time to one's children, that's a struggle in and of itself. Let alone just having a sort of strategic and focused program for raising children, with an understanding of the deen, of any significant level of understanding.
Got some comments that I want to read out. Thank you very much for the brothers and sisters who are engaging. Jazakumullah khair. Sheikh Muhammad Trad, a good friend, mentions, I can imagine the janaza course can be quite demanding, so he just wanted to share his thoughts. It makes a dua for your afia. Sister Reem says, it's a problem of our times. People think anyone in the dawah space should be accessible at all times and feel entitled to their time, and that is not how it should be. Brother Muhammad Rima, needs very little introduction, said, Real Talk at Sheikh Ibrahim, love your firm stance, 100%. May Allah reward you both for the services you provide the community. Mashaykh wear different hats. please avoid burnout and prioritize self-care.
Absolutely.
We need you. Barakallahu feekum. So good to see. Look, before I get to the recent Eid issue, there was one question I had sort of from before, or two rather, that I want to work through. I think these are quite important and interesting. Sheikh Ibrahim, I'll start with you first. What are your biggest concerns for our community's future? Right, as an imam, seeing what you see day in, day out, hot button issues, topics or challenges that you think really do present an existential threat to the iman of our youngsters, of our families, our community. What would they be in your view?
Well, to sum it up in one word, it's identity. And to break that down, it's more so the loss of the religious or the Islamic identity because of the society that we live in. Now, we go through the schooling system here in Australia from K to 12. Within the schooling system itself from K to 12, even within Islamic schools, because of the curriculum itself, there are subliminal messages that are embedded within children. They grow up, they embody these subliminal messages, and they stem from kufr ideologies, be it from capitalism to liberalism to feminism to the rest of it, right? Every other ism under the sun. We harbor these thoughts and we do not even know. I myself went through this curriculum from K to 12. I harbored these thoughts and I didn't even know until I actually, had to really think about it myself after having my very long, journey through studies and also doing my masters and writing my thesis and it was until then that I realized, hang on, I harbor these things, and what if that's me? Well, what about everyone else? Okay.
What like specifically? Can I?
Well, it's a capitalism.
Oh, right, yeah.
Capital. Think about that's destroying us inside out, and we don't even know. Yeah. And that's the biggest challenge for us as Muslims, right? It's about money. Everything around us is about money. Yeah. Why is it about money? Right? We're no longer in a day and age where we live just so we can get ends meet and do what we need to do. No. Now we're just working to
accumulate.
Just to accumulate.
Living to work.
Yeah, living to work, right? Like, there's a certain point where if you've got a roof over your head, you've got a car,
that hadith comes to mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What else do you need? Like, what after that? What, you're gonna get a nicer car, a bigger house? Nicer clothes, and then what? Like, and then what's the end goal? And so all we do is just spend day in, day out working. So again, if I steer it back, it's the identity, and it exacerbates when they go to university, where it starts to become a lot more prominent, and then people start to, a lot of Muslims start to appropriate our deen into something that it is not. And so they want to compartmentalize and then say, I'm a feminist Muslim, or I'm a liberal Muslim, or I'm a postmodern Muslim. Why does Islam require another ideology as though it's insufficient, right? As though our deen doesn't have the answers. Right. And so that is what I believe is our biggest threat as a society, as a Muslim community here in this country.
Yeah, it brings to mind the ayah, يعني أولم يكفيهم أن أنزلنا عليك الكتاب يتلى عليهم. Is it not sufficient that we sent upon you the book for it to be recited upon them? So isn't the Quran sufficient? Of course, it needs to be elaborated, etc. But it's all there. That's important. It doesn't need to be qualified, with an ism. Yeah.
What about yourself? What do you think?
Yeah, so before Sheikh Ibrahim answered, the main, I guess, issue is pretty much what he touched on. So he expressed that as capitalism. It's just an excessive attachment to the dunya generally. And the deen being a footnote in the way Muslims lead their lives. And I think individualism really taking hold. So people talk about the influence of feminism, and then I don't know, toxic masculinity. But I think underlying all that, the common denominator, it really is just this individualism. Not having the mindset to invest in marriages, invest time into raising kids, and if the families are the basic units and the nuclei of the society, then as a community, where are we headed? It is I think from where I stand, from what I'm saying, the scene is a bit bleak. Let's be honest with ourselves. But look, at the end of the day, this deen is inshallah victorious. And it's upon us. It's upon people to just do a lot of introspection. Just to stop being a cog in the wheel, and as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَعِظُكُمْ بِوَاحِدَةٍ أَن تَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ مَثْنًى وَفُرَادًا ثُمَّ تَتَفَكَّرُوا. That telling the Prophet to tell them, addressing the people of Quraysh, I advise you of one thing, that you stand for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in sincerity and earnestness. ثُمَّ تَتَفَكَّرُوا, that you pause and reflect. Maybe صاحبكم من جنة. If you people of Mecca were to pause and reflect, you would realize, well, all this stigma around the Prophet ﷺ isn't actually true, and as a matter of fact, he's not crazy, he's not a madman, etc. And you'll find apparently there's a lot of truth to what he says, all the truth. So we need to pause. We need to have that seclusion and deep introspection about how we're leading our lives, and where we're headed. What's our ultimate vision for ourselves. Like what does happiness constitute? Is it through material wealth? Is it through capitalism? So our existential, those deep existential questions need to be addressed ASAP. That's really the issue.
Something that you said that I want to, and this is the last question before we hop on to that final issue. Being a cog in the wheel, right? One thing that is on my mind, and I know, having grown up in that era, and yourselves really the same, maybe a little bit younger than myself, but really part of the same, is it's a very weird time to be a Muslim, right? It's almost like the pressure, it comes from those identity issues is there, obviously, we know that. But in terms of the Islamophobia, in terms of the constantly being in the spotlight as a community, it's gone. It's like, over time, and there's political reasons for that, the collapse of the revolutions overseas and people not going to fight and all that sort of stuff, that the post 9/11 era has sort of like, just come to a bit of waned, right? And for the first time, it's actually really easy to be Muslim. Like, you can, it's part of inclusion and diversity to celebrate Islam now, right? You can see what's happening with Lakemba and Ramadan nights, for example. It's become a cultural hit. How do we?
I think that's a bit more problematic, though.
Yeah.
See.
Yes. So tell us about.
So I believe before
the difficulty was actually a blessing in some way.
Well, because it made it very clear where those who wanted Islam to fall are your enemies.
Yes.
They make it very clear. But now it's coming from underneath the carpet, and they'll pull the rug from underneath your legs without you even realizing. And so they'll befriend you, they'll shoulder you, at times, and then you think, okay, well, maybe we can hold hands and sing Kumbaya together, right? But in reality, it's not the case, right? So the enemies are now no longer being presented as your enemy. And so what happens is, that's where the dilution starts, okay? Before it's like us and them, okay? Us and them. Well, okay, if it's us and them, I'm gonna stick to what them means, right? I know where my parameters are. Whereas now it's like it's us and inclusion, but it's on our terms without you actually working out your parameters. So really, if you want us to be together, then you have to drop this and you have to drop that, and you have to accept this and you have to accept that, and this is where the dilution starts. And this is why I believe it's more problematic, and more Muslims are going to fall into the whole. There's no issue from a liberal worldview to stand your ground and say this is what Islam says, because it allows for it to happen. Right? A liberal worldview is, okay, I've got my views, you've got your views, no problem, right? Just this is your view, this is my view. I don't have to pander around and say, okay, I can say this or say that. There's izzah in standing your ground. The Prophet ﷺ says, لا يكن أحدكم إمعة يقول أنا مع الناس. Let none of you be an imma'a. What is an imma'a? He says, I am with people. In أحسن الناس أحسنت وإن أساءوا أسأت. If people do good, I do good. But if people do bad, well, I'm going to do bad too, because, well, everyone's doing it, right? Be a principled person. ولكن وطنوا أنفسكم. Be a principled person. I'm not going to sway left and right. My deen says X, Y, and Z. I'm going to follow it. خلاص.
Okay. Thoughts?
Sorry, what was the question?
So the question was, it's become easier to be a Muslim. How do we sort of maintain the strength of our iman and our practicing in that sort of environment where, coming from an era where everything was always about attack on the Muslim. Any Muslim felt besieged. I mean, you walk down, you open the news, first articles about Muslims. You go to the news agent, the first, like the little extract from the paper, it's always about that, right? Open the bulletin at night, everything is like first to second news story.
In addition to what Sheikh Ibrahim mentioned, it's, building a solid foundation. So like taking time out to educate yourself about the constants of the dins and what can vary. Not everything is a difference of opinion. So there's things that are unequivocal within the din that no scholar throughout the 14th century tradition has ever disputed. And only now are presented as points of contention. So having an appreciation for our scholarship and our Islamic legacy that's built up over the centuries, I think that's very key, and not just looking down at scholarship. There's obviously certain aqwal, certain statements that might be odd and weird, and sometimes these are plucked out and presented as the face of Islamic scholarship, as if it's some weird and eccentric thing, but you need to look at the totality and the bigger picture and not miss the forest for the trees.
Yes, no, absolutely. So
very,
very interesting times. So look, we'll end the episode on just a present issue that obviously some people might be thinking about. I think before we do though, just want to read out a couple more comments. Another sister said, "Well said. Appropriating Islam as if it's insufficient as it is. That is a danger of our times." Another brother, Amar, he says, "Great conversation. It is lovely to see how these sheikhs have their finger on the pulse regarding the legitimate problems in the Muslim community. Individualism/capitalism is definitely a huge under-recognized issue of our times. May Allah make it easy for us." I mean,
so we're not out of touch.
Oh, well, there you go. Let's wrap up and go home. Alhamdulillah. So look, so recently, and some people wrote to us with this as an example of where imams are out of touch. So they said, so what I'm referring to for the brothers and sisters is, so there's been this slight controversy over the last few days where the Australian National Imams Council has released its position that Eid will be on Saturday, not this week, but the week after, right? And some people have been commenting on that and saying, look, you're out of touch, because another imam who also follows the calculation method has said Eid will be on Friday. And so there's that, making it difficult for families, right? It's so out of touch. And there's been all sorts of things said about politics and power plays and all the rest of it. I don't even I don't want to go down that path because I think that's not the point here. But people have used as an example of saying our imams are out of touch with the community and its needs, right? So I want to just sort of use this issue and tap into some thinking from both of you. First, in a nutshell, to explain in the succinctest way possible what's actually happened. Sheikh Ibrahim, how would you describe what's gone on in the last couple of days? Who said what and what's happened?
The Australian National Imams Council has always been the one that releases the information by the Australian Fatwa Council, headed by the Mufti of Australia, Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad, on when the day of Eid is and also when the start of Ramadan is. Now, the method that the Fatwa Council has always adopted is the calculations with the possibility of sighting. So anytime there is a possibility to sight the moon in Australia, then they would call the day for Eid or the day for the start of Ramadan. Now that's always been the case for a very long time. And it's been the adopted position by the Fatwa Council. This year, the calculations for seeing the moon in Australia is very different in comparison to all other years, and the reason being is that the moon itself is setting at the same time as the sun is setting, which means it becomes impossible to see. Now, even with astronomers themselves, right, they will tell you that there's difference of opinion on when we can see the moon or not, after a couple of hours, after 8, 16, 4, whatever it is, right? They'll go back and forth on this. Put that aside. There's absolute consensus that in Australia, you will not be able to see the moon. Now, that's the adopted position of the Australian National Imams Council. It's حسابات بإمكانية الرؤية, which is calculations with the possibility of seeing. And it starts in Australia and ends in Australia. Which is a local calculation. And that's where the difference of opinion happened this time around. Where now there's a proposed calculation for it to be the global calculation.
Possibility of sighting anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world. Now, previously, it's always been the case that you can always have a possibility of sighting it in Australia and somewhere else in the world, which just lined up, right? But so we've never had this issue before. But this time round, there is a possibility of sighting the moon in other countries like Saudi Arabia or Lebanon, for example. Now, so the principle that the Mufti of Australia actually held is the same principle that he's always had. Now, if we started the Ramadan according to this principle, we can't change it now. The Mufti of Australia, Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad, makes it very, very clear. He's unequivocal about this. He has no issues if the Fatwa Council itself agrees to changing the criteria so we can agree to start the month of Ramadan or the day of Eid.
Yeah.
Now, because we've already started the month of Ramadan on specific criteria, we can't change it now. And so he's saying, we can't do it right now. We must continue with this criteria because this is how we started the month of Ramadan. So it's a principled approach.
Yeah.
And others have a difference of opinion. They say, no, we must take, the global siding. That's fine, right? There's room for difference of opinion here. This is what I'm getting to, right?
Yeah.
There's room for difference of opinion. And the implications of this are pretty much like every other time, we've come through the last 15 years when we started Ramadan and seen Eid. We've got the local moon siders and the global moon siders or the regional moon siders, right? It's very, very similar. It's just a local calculation and a global calculation. That's the difference between them.
So, Sheikh Jamaal, what's happened when it comes to Sheikh Yahya and so forth? There's been a different position adopted by some Mashaykh.
Yeah.
How would you explain that position in an absolute nutshell?
All right. So, I mean, I don't want to sort of express a personal position, but from what I gather, it's still an unfolding and developing situation at the moment. But, I think, there is a sentiment that, like Imam Mosque is one of the very first institutions here in Sydney. And it's been announcing the start of Ramadan and and its end, from the 70s, basically, and this, predates Anik, so, and especially within the migrant Arab community, which is tied to Imam Mosque, that's, the go-to and the reference point, so, SubhanAllah, it's worked, there hasn't been this issue, in all the years, up until today, but then, we find ourselves, in a situation where, there's this, sort of situation presented, which, I just feel, had the announcement been a bit later or towards Eid, perhaps, there could have been room to, mitigate, I guess, the fallout, but, I guess it is what it is.
So that's where the difference has occurred, where Sheikh Yahya from the campaign,
and it's not Sheikh Yahya alone. There's actually other sheikhs outside of Anik. Quite a few who are more senior and sort of very well established within the migrant Arab community. That are sort of on the same board, and also within Anik, there are actually other sheikhs that have spoken out, like the Sheikh Fidat al-Majdoub. He made it very clear that he believes that Eid should be on Friday.
So I mean, we're not going to solve this issue here. That's not the point.
Yeah.
But one word you mentioned,
I'm just describing.
That's exactly how
it's unfolding.
It's a live situation.
Yeah, but ultimately, look, for the individual Muslim, it's
well, that's what I want to get to. Right?
The
fallout.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Implication.
So, Sheikh, tell us about the fallout, the implication. What does it mean for us?
That's exactly right. So, it means look, if you want to call it a fallout, you can call it a fallout, right? No problem.
The practical implication, let's say.
Just put all of this aside, okay? For me as an individual, what do? Okay? The Muslim community is not just based in Sydney, right? It's far greater than this. But there's a sizable Muslim community in Sydney. It's huge. And yes, the LMA has been around for a very long time. And there are a lot of oldies that go with what the LMA actually comes out with, right? And so I've already got brothers calling me up and they're telling me, look, I follow the Mufti and I've been doing it for so long. My father, he tells me, no, I'm going to follow the LMA. Are we going to split our family and each of us is going to have Eid on a different day? I tell him, Akhi, please. Wallahi, this is not the intention. And so long as the mashayikh from these two organizations have placed it on themselves, it's not upon you as the lay person to then work out which one is right, which one is wrong, which one am I going to follow. Is there an opinion out there? Is it valid? Yes. Khalas. You are not required to do anything else. Keep your family together. Do not break the unity in your family as an individual. So you don't go and break your fast a day later after your father. Keep them together. If your father, wants to understand the situation a bit more, maybe go back and forth, no problem. Speak to your father. But if your father's being adamant, no, this is the day on Friday, and you want to come out and say, well, it's going to be on Saturday, don't pick a fight. It's not between you and your father. Leave the mashayikh to sort this out, right? Even if we don't reach a conclusion, right? At the end of the day, you are not required by Allah Azza wa Jal to work it out because you don't have the ahliyah. You don't have the capability or the knowledge to do that. So what's required by you then is just to unify your own family.
And in fact, Sheikh Muhammad Al-Dadu, Hafidhullah, when he came, he was asked, about, this particular issue, not just about, which method should we adopt, but, the thing that he really emphasized was, beyond the specifics of what's the most valid and ideal way to determine the entry and exit of Ramadan. The most essential thing is, these are very, it could be considered in some sense minutiae within fiqh, but the main thing is ijtima' kalimat al-muslimin, keeping the Muslim community intact. Now, that's, it's tough because, I guess, it's on the sheikhs to unite people, but then, now it's like the layperson has to deal with a situation where, like his own family is celebrating on different days, and it could be, 2 or 3 days, so like, which one gives, which opinion do you go with, it might not necessarily be a case of, all right, which one's the correct one, it's just, how do I manage with this? It's a desperate situation, it's going to cause, friction within the individual family, so it's a very tough situation, and I really empathize with, everyone sort of faced with that dilemma,
From a community perspective, from a practical perspective, I actually see no difference between this and what's been happening or happened 15 years ago with the moon sighting issue. Now, we haven't been commenting here on the merits or otherwise of sighting versus calculation. Definitely not going to go down that path on the show, right? But for those who may know a bit of community history, there was a time when, when the moon, we call the moon wars, it was between people who do local or regional sighting and global sighting. And this split families right down the middle as well, right? That after moon scene, everywhere the hadith says, if it's sighted, then break your fast. And so people were divided, and I can speak from personal experience.
Yeah, but that's how crystallized,
That's
so
right.
it's different to a new sort of win.
Sure. But I think the similar sort of principle can be applied here, which is at that time, some of the more, let's say, wise mashayikh who saw the bigger picture when these youth were running around sort of saying, global, the hadith said this, and they were willing to literally say, I don't care, my family's fasting the wrong day, I'm going to break my fast, I'm going to do Eid a day earlier, and then I'll celebrate the next day. And people did that. And then some mashayikh came out and said, you know what, your family is more important in this instance, right? And they had a religious sort of Islamic sort of justification for that. And so you should do X, right? I see a very similar wisdom to that applying here, exactly what you said, Sheikh, which is that it's not on the layperson to solve this issue. And if the mashayikh, have it on their neck, then really it shouldn't even cause a problem. And it'll cause an initial sort of, and it may only happen the 1 year, it may not happen again.
Yeah, that's more in terms of, which one's the correct, who do I follow?
Yeah.
But the issue is, okay, like, what do I do? Like, the reality is people are potentially, individual families are going to be possibly celebrating on different days, parents are different to the children, so what do we do in that situation, and it's a...
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like a similar thing. It's like, what did those people advise people to do, and where did the dust settle with that? Yeah. And honestly, it settled on
I think just children should follow their parents.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And to be honest, if I could roll back the clock, I'd probably have done the same. But that's another issue.
Probably better way to do,
that's exactly right. Yeah. So that's interesting, and I guess it may be a novel thing. It may not happen again, inshallah. But it's been an interesting experience. Like, what reflections, if any, on the issue of, let's say, unity? Is this a sign of disunity, or is it just different opinions, people getting their knickers in a knot, and people just settle down? How do you see the Sheikh at a bigger picture level?
Look, I know things that happen behind the scenes, right? And I think there's a lot of work that Imams need to do behind the scenes to get things right. There's a lot of community baggage that's just been around for such a long time, and it's just community history. It's just, I'm personally tired of it. I'm sick of it. I really don't care about it either, right? And I personally believe only just give it a couple of years, and those behind the scenes will move on, and we're going to have a new generation, inshallah, who are going to look way past this point. We know that the identity of the Muslims is at stake. I'm not going to be sitting there putting all of my energy about when the start of Ramadan is and when the day of Eid is, when I know that this person is not even a Muslim. For God's sake, this person, and I never get a phone call from this specific sheikh or never hear a message from them. But when it comes to Eid or Ramadan, non-stop. Where are you when the Muslim community is dying? Where are you when the Muslim community is crying out for help because they don't know their deen, the basics of their deen, or they're being influenced by all of the ideologies around them? I mean, let's actually use some wisdom, really understand the challenges of our community now, put all of our effort in where it needs to be, as opposed to sitting there quarreling about things that are just so petty in my opinion.
Sure. Final words.
I lost my train of thought, but I think also just coming back to the point where the lack of infrastructure. We mentioned earlier. Like we need to appreciate that we don't like have an Al-Qaf ministry where like it's just completely centralized. So we live in the West. It's a secular country, and we were sort of a pop-up kind of community. I think maybe it would be beneficial to look at the experience of the other Western countries. Like how does the UK do it? Like is the UK as divided as we are? Is the US as divided as we are? Maybe they are, but like how do they manage it at least? How do they navigate the differences? Is it it's so divisive and so problematic that to the extent that individual families are being split over different days of Eid. So just learning from experiences on how to deal with this as a minority in the West, inshallah.
Any thoughts on that, Sheikh?
For the time being, until we, inshallah, get to a better...
No, I think I agree with Sheikh Jamaal. I mean, because we don't have that centralized organization where there's authority involved, right? Every other country, Muslim country that is, the Mufti comes out, he makes the call, khalas, everyone follows. Like whether you've got a difference of opinion or not, it doesn't matter because there's authority behind that specific organization. Like let's use Diyanet for example in Turkey. The Mufti will get out, he calls the day of Eid, that's it, everyone follows, right? And the same thing across all the other Muslim countries. Here, I mean, rightly said by Sheikh Jamaal, there's no establishment of Awqaf, right? We don't have that centralized body. Now, I know Australian National Imams Council is trying to be that body, but there's no backing that gives it the authority. It's more so community authority as opposed to
consensual sort of
no, as opposed to like authority given by government, for example. It's different. It's a very different kind of kettle of fish, right? So until we get there, that's when you can really start to like centralize everything. But for now, we live in the West, and anyone who's got a voice can basically the Wild West, right? So anyone who's got a voice, they can jump on Facebook and they've got their opinion, and all of a sudden, if they've got 3 people that have liked their post, well, the Muslim community agrees with me now, right? So a lot of people, look, we've got some challenges. We definitely do, right? We're going to solve them. And whilst we speak about some of the bleak futures of the Muslim community, I believe that the Muslim community has a lot of hope. The Muslim community itself is growing. It's doubling in size every 10 to 12 years. The amount of Muslims who identify proudly that they are Muslim is increasing, and they're doing it in a way unlike any other time in history. And to leave on a positive note, the Muslims in this country, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, are a beacon of hope, not just for the next generation of Muslims, but even for the non-Muslims in this country, where we're going to offer this deen in its true form, where Australians will see it and understand it and embrace it. And we'll see more and more people accept Islam, and we'll see more and more people enter this deen.
Absolutely. And on a similar note, like I would remind people of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in fact, where he relates that Yaqub alayhi salam told his his sons, in this bleak situation of not being able to find Yusuf and his brother, يا بني اذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه ولا تيأسوا من روح الله. Do not despair of the relief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. None despair of the relief of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except the disbelievers. And elsewhere, قال ومن يقنط من رحمة ربه إلا الضالون. Who, he said, who despairs of the mercy of his Lord except for the wrongdoers and the misguided. So the theme of hope is very central to our aqidah, and husn al-dhan billah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having a good assumption of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, there might be chaos on like issues like something, but like it doesn't mean that the deen is chaotic. There's a difference between the deen and the human endeavors to try to interpret and apply the deen. So it's important to distinguish the preservation of the deen itself, the deen that's revealed, the revelation, and the human endeavors to do ijtihad and apply to the reality, and the sort of politics around that, around the political considerations and logistics, and subhanallah, the other thing I was going to mention, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, إذا قامت القيامة وفي يد أحدكم فسيلة فليغرسها. This is the attitude, where the Prophet ﷺ said, if the day of judgment, the final day was to arrive, and there is a seedling in the hand of one of you. You know, it's supposed to be the ultimate doom and gloom, but you know, he just said, you know, plant it nonetheless. You know, so. That's the spirit, you know. No matter how gloom, you know, you don't just give up. You know, khalas, you know, we're reaching the end of the times. You know, because I find a lot of brothers getting into this mindset of end of times. You know, let's just, you know, like the ummah's gone. You know, there's too much corruption. You know, let's just, I don't know, you know, it's just this very dismal. Okay, the reality might be dismal, but your internal spiritual experience, you know, and attitude, you know, that's, you can control that. You can't control the external reality. So and you're just connecting yourself with the deen, you know, and you know, just reinforcing the certainty and the yaqeen within yourself, despite the you know, just tranquility amid turbulence. You know, that's really the spirit, inshallah. Yeah.
And perhaps remembering that Muslims have thought for 1,200 years that Yom Qiyamah was around the corner.
And you know, like, you know, we're talking about like, you know, look at the infighting within, you know, the Umayyad and Abbasid, you know, like, you know, brothers, you know, killing each other over the throne. You know, that's much, you know, like, this is not, you know, this is very benign compared to what was going on then. You know, these golden ages of Islam. You know, so. You just never know. It's just the reality of human existence and the human condition, you know. Yeah.
May Allah reward you both. It's been a fascinating conversation, wonderful conversation. Glad that we had this, and I really feel, and just to finish on a note from the audience, both sheikhs explained the differing Eid announcements very well, alhamdulillah. So, you know, a message of hope, a very positive message to end on, and certainly, I think, you know, without putting too much pressure on you, you know, hope we're in good hands for the future, and may all the brothers and mashaykh follow in your path, and may we strengthen you rather than take away from you, as your constituents and members of your community, and anything that we can do to help on that path, obviously we're here to do so. So may Allah reward you and grant you steadfastness in dealing with the challenge that you do. Thank you again for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Jazakumullah khair. My pleasure. And Jazakumullah khair, brothers and sisters, for tuning in, for the comments, great interactions, and I'm sure there'll be more after the fact. Thank you for joining us tomorrow night, inshallah, in about 24 hours from now. Myself and Sister Reem will be joined by Sister Dalia to discuss an issue which has some parallels to today, which is should Muslims in what they face in the West think about migrating back to the Muslim world for the safety, longevity of their families and the safeguarding of their deen. It's going to be an absolutely cracker discussion. We'll be going toe to toe with Sister Dalia. We've told her already that we're not going to hold back because you know, we're not going anywhere, and she's got to show us the case for why Muslims should consider that. So it's going to be a great topic. She's a fantastic sister, and we look forward to having her presence then. Reminder once again, the odd nights and the last 2 nights of Ramadan are running away. So if you haven't already, think about your sadaqah, think about your zakah, and consider National Zakat Foundation with its amazing work in our community and strengthening our community as a potential destination for your giving and generosity in these last 2 nights. We ask Allah to reward you, and we look forward to joining you again tomorrow. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa astaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wal 'asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.